Hello there, welcome to Shaping African Conversations. This week, our topic, sorry, this week our conversation continues. Here, as always, we try and put into perspective for you COVID-19 and mental health. Well, I'm sure anywhere you're watching us from right now, you'll have noticed that this week people seem to be more up and about than they have been in the previous weeks. And that's simply because you could say that our economy is opening up more. Well, today we want to put that into focus and have a conversation around restructuring and restructuring for recovery and resilience. And of course, as always, I have amazing guests who will be joining me right here on this web series. And remember, please, if you have any questions, let me know what your questions are. And of course, where you're streaming us from, we're coming to you on Facebook on the Switch TV channel. And if you feel like this is a conversation that you and your friend need to be participating in, please make sure to send them an invite for them to actually log in, and they could do this from the Matatu, from anywhere, literally. Okay, so right now, let's meet my amazing panel, kicking off with our regular, Gina Dean Karaoke. Hey, Gina, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm excited for the conversation this evening and very happy that my colleague Karina can join us today all the way from South Africa.
Amazing, yes. So Shaping African Conversations. So we have panelists from South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya for today. So let's meet Karina. Karina, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Tamima, how are you?
And thank you. So, Karina, maybe just tell us a bit about yourself, because you are coming to us from Johannesburg.
Yes, that's correct. I lead the advisory practice at Edelman, which is the world's largest communications consultancy. So I'm joining you on behalf of Edelman.
So much, Karina. And also we have Gathoni Mbugwa, who is a clinical psychologist at Chiromolen Medical Center. Hey, Gathoni.
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Okay, and of course, one of our other regulars, Tommy Sin Ojo, all the way from Nigeria, representing MITV. Hey, Tommy, how are you?
Hi, Tamima. Good to be with you this afternoon. Good to see you back.
Thank you. Much better. Okay, and then also we have Tabitha Kihara. Tabitha is an edupreneur. So, Tabitha, where are you?
Hey, Tamima. Thank you for having me here. I'm in Nairobi. I run an organization called Mapobrook Limited, and we deal with writers. I'm a writing coach and an author.
Thank you. And also we have Susan Mtana, who is, Susan, where are you at? There you are. So Susan, please tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, Tamima. Thank you for hosting me. I'm Susan from Kidogo. It's a social enterprise in Nairobi that deals with quality and affordable childcare services in the informal settlement. Thank you.
Okay, so obviously today we have a lineup full of ladies. I just noticed that right now, guys. Okay, so let's jump straight into it. So we are talking about recovery and resilience. And why recovery, you might ask? Obviously, the last couple of weeks have been a tough week for most businesses, and they've literally been taken through the tumbler thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic. We've seen scenarios where entire businesses, entire industries have had to completely shut down. But now, slowly, all across the world, we're seeing more and more economies are actually opening up. And what this means is that a lot of these businesses and industries are now on a path to recovery, to at least get some semblance of what normalcy was, pre-COVID-19. And obviously, this comes with a lot of challenges, not just from a business point of view in terms of processes and systems and people, but also on a personal level. Because usually when you're dealing with change, you have to actually fortify yourself and make sure that you have enough resilience to actually get you through whatever it is you need to do to actually be firmly on your way towards recovery. So I want to start with Karina, and probably Karina, because this is the first time we are having someone joining us live all the way from Johannesburg. I just want to find out from you, what is the situation there like now? Are you opening up?
We are opening up. We went into a fairly early lockdown, I would say probably mid-March. And the idea around that was very much around trying to flatten the curve, but at the same time also raise the opportunities and raise the line, if you like, for us to capacitate our healthcare system. And according to the feedback and according to our government, we've managed to do that. That being said, there is no discounting the fact that infections will likely rise. So we've had to then reopen the economy, as I think most markets have had to do, after a few weeks of that lockdown period. So the government has very much leveled the approach, and it's been a gradual reopening. We now find ourselves in a level 3, which has seen most of our business operations reopen. Large-scale manufacturing, mining operations, etc., have come back online. The retail sector is fully open now as well, but we still see areas such as restaurants, food courts, etc., personal care services still not quite online again. And I think that will continue to gradually come back online. But certainly not a decrease in cases. We've seen over 50,000 cases of COVID-19 at the moment. And we will probably likely continue to see that spike into July.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Karina. And I just want to rope in Gathoni, because there's something that you've just reminded all of us. In as much as we're talking about the economy opening up, and not just in Kenya, we are seeing this is something that's happening across most countries in the world. But at the same time, a lot of us have to go back towards this normal. We're trying to find normalcy, but at the back of your mind, you're very aware that there's this thing called COVID-19 still out there. So Gadon, in the context of now building resilience, because I believe for a lot of people, a couple of weeks ago, the directive was stay at home, don't leave the house unless you necessarily have to. But today, we are seeing that is slowly changing, whereby more and more now people are being encouraged to find whatever sort of normal they can. And a lot of this also is geared towards just opening up the economy. So this resilience, how do you then go about your everyday activities with the knowledge that there's this thing called COVID-19 out there? How do you build that resilience?
Thank you, Tamima, for that. Let's start with what restructuring is. So the restructuring is a process of basically intentionally trying to replace the negative thought patterns with something that is with the positive thought patterns. Once you're able to restructure your mind, then you begin the process of building resilience. And resilience is the ability to be able to cope despite any setbacks that you could have experienced. The first thing to look at when you're building resiliency is to focus on your physical and emotional health. If your physical and emotional health are not okay, then that actually makes you more prone to more anxiety and more stresses. Another thing that we need to look at is just accepting the situation as it is and restructuring your mind in now, what do I do next now that we are in this space? And one of the most important things that I would like to highlight is for us to be aware of the kind of negative thought patterns we have, which we call thinking errors. Are you able to identify the thinking errors that are going through your mind? One of them is catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is looking at worst case scenario in whatever situation that you are in. So if your mind always goes to worst case scenario, then you know that this is an error in thinking and this is what I need to work with. Having should statements, I should have done this. I should have prepared myself better. I should have saved more. I should have been better at work. The truth is there is nothing that you can be able to do now in what has already gone past you. Yeah. So restructuring that is looking at what can I be able to do now. Another thing is mind filters. So having mental filters is just looking at negative situations and completely discarding or forgetting about other positive things that you've been able to do, other positive things that are around you. Simple things like being alive, maybe having a job if you have one, or having the ability to be in control and to be able to do something about it.
What
so
you're
if
saying,
you're able to identify, sorry?
Basically what you're saying is right now is a time where mind over matter, you have to actually work towards building your own mental resilience. And then ultimately, and
Right.
this applies for a lot of people, because I mean, we're talking about a global scale pandemic and nobody really knows when the end is in sight. So there's a lot of speculation. So what you're saying is take it a day at a time. So
Take it a day at a time.
exactly.
And I like that. Mind over matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last thing that I would like to say, that everything usually begins with the thoughts. So if you have negative thought patterns, then you're likely to engage in an action that is negative, and then too many actions become a prevailing behavior. So using the acronym TAB, always be aware of your thoughts, then the actions, and then the behavior. If at all you're to be in charge of any situation and control it in any way.
Some wonderful advice there. Thank you so much, Gathoni. And maybe let me just rope in Tommy. Tommy, what's the situation like in Nigeria, for instance? Because we are now almost 3 months into this pandemic for most African countries. So are you seeing, similarly to what we are seeing in South Africa, in Kenya, that the economy is slowly opening up and people are working towards a recovery of some sort? Tommy, you're on mute. Please unmute yourself. You're on mute. I can't get your sound.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so please take
Can
that
you hear
again.
me now?
Yes, I can.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Tamima. Yes, in Nigeria, we must note that Nigeria has experienced COVID-19 for about 102 days. So that's 102 days now, from February 27th till date. Now, Nigeria went from 1 then to 12,801 cases as of today. And by midnight, we're going to have more. So despite the fact that the numbers are rising, Nigeria decided to open up because it's affecting the economy, it's affecting a lot of people, and so we can't be locked down forever. Now, the point is that businesses have begun to recover gradually. First of all, I was talking about the people who were involved in taxes today. I had a conversation with one of them, and he said to me that even government, the IGR for government has dropped drastically because the SMEs and the MSMEs practically do not have income. They've not had income in over 3 months. So there is nothing to pay government tax for. They have not been working. Artisans have not been at work. The informal sector was practically shut down. So now that people have been allowed to go back to work, it's been a very gradual. And when I mean gradual, I mean that the pace has been really slow, at a snail speed. That's what we're crawling at now, as far as the businesses are concerned. But of course, some people added better, like the pharmaceuticals were, not locked down during the COVID-19, pandemic lockdown. They were in lockdown. And that's why we invited Olaide Ashweto, hoping that she was going to join us, because the pharmaceuticals have been at work. And apart from that, they were also beneficial to some of the reliefs and palliatives given by government in terms of money to boost their businesses. There was no import as well. So they had to source for local materials in most cases. So businesses for pharmaceuticals, for construction, they're getting a bit better, getting much better. But when it comes to other matters like the construction and the export and import, those ones are grinded to a halt.
And of course, the hospitality industry, I'm sure, Tommy, the hospitality industry is one of the industries that has been affected world over. We are seeing complete and total shutdown in some cases.
For us, in fact, hotels are even being advised to give their property as isolation center. That's what some of them have done, so that the property doesn't just lie fallow. Some of them gave the property to government, so government can make use of them as isolation centers. And government is still looking at getting much more in the next couple of weeks. So as businesses begin to open up, we continue to share with you what our successes have been. But so far now, we are going at a very slow and snail speed.
So I want to rope in Gina with my next question, because it's very interesting that now we're seeing really everywhere as the activities are going towards opening up economies, but at the same time, the statistics are showing that the rate of infection is actually higher than it previously was. So just in theme with our conversation today of restructuring for recovery, so what do you think are some of those best practices that perhaps you've seen businesses employ just to gain the confidence of their staff and of course the marketplace at large? Because it's a very valid question, because initially we had the numbers were much lower and people were being asked to stay at home, but now we are seeing that there are more positive cases. Tommy has told us Nigeria has 12,000, Kenya now we are almost hitting 3,000, but irrespective of this, now people are actually going back out into the workforce. Gina, can you hear me? I think we're having a connectivity issue. So as Gina is sorting that, can I throw that to you, Karina?
Yes, I think it's a really difficult balancing act because we've seen over the last couple of months this idea of the economy and the recovery associated with that, and the idea of really balancing that with a difficult decision around making sure you're prioritizing people's lives and their health. And it's a very difficult scenario. And I think what a lot of companies have looked at doing is really making sure that they've prioritized their employee base, that they've prioritized their workforces, which has been really great to see. If we think about this idea of companies really making sure that they are building trust, it's absolutely something that needs to be considered if you think about your employees and your staff, your workforce, as really as an important stakeholder group who also needs to trust in the organization. And we've seen a lot of really great practices coming into place. Typically, I mean, we're seeing, and from an Edelman perspective, we haven't yet returned to work. A lot of our clients haven't yet returned to work. Well, we call it return to the office because I guess a lot of people have still been working.
Yeah.
So fortunately, we've had the privilege of being able to work from home. But I think what we are seeing then is this idea of a gradual, very gradual return. And the government has certainly said, if you have the capacity to work from home, please continue to do so. And that has been the mandate throughout. So I think that there's certain things that come into play when you think about returning to an office space as well, really making sure that you're caring for employees, that you're being compassionate about it, that you're treating them as humans who have real fears and real anxieties and very individual cases where perhaps there's childcare requirements, perhaps there's pre-existing conditions that their employer needs to be aware of. And then I think that's really what we're starting to see coming into play. And that plays alongside some of the practical implications of making sure that there's things like enough PPE, that we've considered the commute for certain people who have to travel on public transport to get to the office, that we've looked at the staggered day, staggered hours of working in smaller groups and teams. And I think that's been the principle that really different organizations have been thinking about.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Karina. And I just want to invite back Gina. Gina, do we have you now? Sorry, we had a bit of a connectivity issue earlier. Gina, you're on mute. You'll have to unmute yourself, please. Okay. So as we wait for... We have Gina now?
Hi.
Okay, cool.
Sorry about that, guys. This week is not my week. But I think we really need to think about what a new normal really looks like. And the COVID-19 recovery offers us an opportunity to create a different type of normal, one that can probably help restore trust in governments and reaffirm crucial economic and social rights. But I think on the continent, we can't really let our guard down yet because most countries have not peaked. And discussions around the world that are emerging from the corona pandemic. Many commentators are wondering whether the crisis offers the opportunity to set the world on a more sustainable and equal path. And I think that's really going to be something that we see in Africa. And as Karina said, issues around trust and putting our employees' health first is really, really critical.
Obviously, you're an expert in crisis communication. And this is definitely, without a doubt, a crisis that everyone is dealing with on such a global scale. So, in terms of tips that businesses can actually implement right now, and looking at the key phases of crisis, responding, recovering, and thriving, what do you feel there are gaps existing, especially in the African context? Because I kind of feel like the actions that we've seen companies, that we've seen governments actually put in place in the West, in a lot of ways, when we look at our continent, we look at how some of our governments are responding, some of the key businesses are responding, it leaves a lot to be desired.
Well, from my experience, that we've handled a few crises, obviously nothing to the scale of the global pandemic, but crises are often a moment of change. My experience from a humanitarian context is that they should never be seen as a temporary breakdown, but rather as a process of change, creating new frameworks of social representation and regulation. And so I think, if we sort of use this opportunity to see how we can, put in best practices, demands for a new order were already emerging before the pandemic struck, with lots of people wanting to see more equality, and we've seen that now with the protests in the U.S., that the COVID-19 has exposed an underbelly of so many things in countries, and in organizations. So I do think that organizations worldwide will be relooking at themselves, introspecting. And in Africa, in this uniquely challenging environment that we have to really figure out, how do we make our businesses more resilient? The rapidly changing COVID-19 picture means one false move can seriously impact corporate performance and value. And so, I do think this is an opportunity for businesses, for us to really look at this crisis and figure out how, we can look at turning things around more rapidly, how we can overcome financial difficulties, and how we cope with distress situations. So I do think that is something that we need to look at. Obviously, taking care of our people. For any operation, the most important resource is people. Therefore, they should be our first call when it comes to who we're looking after. During this phase, I think companies need to establish a more robust and frequent communications channel with all employees, and one that includes a monitoring mechanism to understand whether the employees and how they're feeling about returning to work, and or how their families have been infected or impacted by the virus. We're obviously, as Karina said, considering more remote or partially remote working environments, with a portion of employees working in the office and the rest working from home. Businesses must be sensitive to employees' families and their safety and health, be proactive, and give frequent advice to families on how best to protect themselves at home and in the office once they return.
Thank you so much, Gina. Some wonderful tips there. Remember, wherever it is you are streaming us from, let me know if you have any questions on what we're discussing today, which is the restructuring for recovery and resilience. And let me just invite my next guest, who is Tabitha Kihara. So Tabitha, you're an edupreneur, writing coach, educational researcher. And currently you're saying that in the midst of the pandemic, you've actually been able to successfully launch a motivational business. So probably just tell us about that. And perhaps, in your opinion, in the context of preparing businesses, and not just businesses, even individuals, in the context of the people working in those businesses, for recovery. Tabitha, you are on mute. I think today everybody seems to forget.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you so
back.
much. Towards the end of last year, I started using online collaborative tools to reach my clients. I run a writing consultancy. So I teach my clients how to write their books. And once they write their books, and then they're able to create their online courses. So towards the end of last year, I began using e-learning collaborative tools like ThinkFic. And there are many collaborative e-learning tools. We have ThinkFic, we have Canvas, we have Schoology, we have Moodle. There are so many. So I began using ThinkFic. And so when the pandemic hit, I again upgraded to Zoom. And it was so easy for me to progress. And I got so many people that wanted to learn how to write, and also how to write their books. And even after writing their books, to be able to to convert their books to businesses, to courses that they can teach other people. For example, if you're baking and now because of the pandemic, you're not able to bake, then you turn that to a course. You begin teaching other people. So I realized that the future is digital. That's where we are all going to go. And that is what that has taught me. So in this season, I have had many clients, and that is one of the reasons because I've embraced technology. Thank you.
Some wonderful advice you're dishing out there. So probably if there's anyone who's watching, because without a doubt the future is digital, and for a lot of industries, literally this is something that's happening overnight, where for instance the education sector right now, e-learning is now the new norm because schools are out in Kenya all the way till September. So in your experience, what advice would you give to anyone in terms of how to make sure that they're adequately prepared and of course well equipped to actually start utilizing e-learning in a very beneficial way for the teachers and for the students?
To start with, I say what is important is to learn basic computer literacy and also have good internet connectivity. And then we have many e-learning collaborative tools, and most of them are open source. So they are easy to use, and anybody can be able to transition their business to an e-learning course, and then they can be able to train other people. That means that that is an extra source of income for them.
When we're talking about even like the basic computer skills, I think for a lot of people, like if I looked at my experience, literally like in the last couple of weeks, I've pretty much learned how to use Zoom. I think Google Meets. I think there's a Microsoft one. Like I'm finding that every time I'm getting meeting invitations, it's something different and you quickly have to adapt. Nobody really has time to say, let me stop and teach you how to use Zoom. And that really is the mindset of of anyone who's in the workplace today. You have to be very tech savvy. You have to be someone who can easily pick up, new systems, new applications, because I'm pretty sure that 2020 is gonna go down in history as the year whereby tech literally took over a lot of business processes. And I want to invite right now Susan Turner. So Susan, are you with us? Susan?
Okay, yes, Susan, I can hear you.
Okay, super, yeah. So I'm just going to remind everyone, please unmute when I call on you. And remember, whatever it is you're streaming us from, let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to ask questions. Tell me what your experience has been. Are you back to work now? Have you reopened your business? So Susan, you work with a Kenyan social enterprise whose mission is to improve access to quality, affordable early childhood care and education in low-income communities. So earlier on, Gina was talking about sustainability. And I feel like one of the things that this pandemic has actually been able to bring to the forefront is just how much inequalities we have in our societies. For instance, if we look at children, and I'll use the education sector as an example. If you look at kids in private school settings, they're doing e-learning. But unfortunately, that is not really the case when it comes to children who are, in some public schools. And as well, even in the workplace, we are seeing that also a lot of inequalities are actually showing up, in the sense that probably people who are sitting a bit higher up in the chain can afford to work from home, but some people don't necessarily have that luxury, where they're still expected to go to the office because they don't have the internet, they don't have the laptops. So Susan, probably just tell us about what you're doing in the community in the context of just encouraging people to prepare themselves for recovery and resilience.
Okay, thank you, Tamima. So let me say at Kidogo, we deal with children from 0 to 5 years. There is the daycare plus the PP1 and PP2. And in the low-income communities, you find like maybe people may not be having the access to the digital medium, and it's really a challenge. So once COVID struck in Kenya, we asked ourselves, like, why are we existing as Kidogo? And our vision says that we imagine a world where all children have the opportunity to reach their full potential despite the background. So it took us back to the planning scenario, whereby we are like, how do we tailor make the current model that will operate when schools are on, now that we have children at home? How do we tailor make the model? So we went back, and for example, just to mention, the components of our model, for example, are also borrowed from the nurturing care framework, where we are looking at safe and stimulating environment, things like health, nutrition, and wash. And in this time, this is the time that we know that our children will digress in terms of the nutrition because of malnutrition and also stunted growth. So we were like, how can we ensure that we still achieve our vision? So we decided to come up with doing our mission in terms of delivering of play packs to the children because they cannot access maybe the digital media. So in this case, play packs whereby it has a daily schedule or a routine to guide the teacher or the caregiver on how to engage the child. And also in school, they used to like routine, maybe circle time, potty time. So in this case, just telling them at home, this is what you can do. And I want you to imagine in the informal settlement, it is a place whereby maybe the room is a 10 by 10 Mabati room. So when you talk about a safe and stimulating environment, how do we ensure or how do we teach the parent to ensure that they create that space, that room that is stimulating to the child? Or how do we protect the child from abuse? So to us, we took it up in order to ensure that the child still gains the cognitive development while at home. So in terms of the play pack distribution, nutritional supplementation, and parental engagement, just check-ins and just talking to them and telling them, like, for example, these are the tips. Maybe you can have story time with the child in order to ensure that the children are engaged and do not digress. And let me say, like, also one thing that is very key is in terms of responsive caregiving. You know, right now, maybe parents are stressed or maybe their mental well-being is actually wanting, and they may decide to push all that pressure on the child. So in this case, you're like, give that ambience, that good environment for the child. Listen to them. And we are looking at, in terms of recovery of the economy, childcare, we want to make it like a public good because most women are involved in the day-to-day building of the economy and sustainability. And in this case, we want to ensure that if the woman goes somewhere maybe to look for a job, how do we ensure that the childcare needs are met? Whom do we partner with to ensure that? Because in Kenya, if you look at the 0 to 3 years, it's like there is no current like a legislation that follows that actually empowers those children. So like who can Kidogo partner with in this moment to ensure that the 0 to 3s are actually taken care of as we decide to recover the economy? So that at the end of the day, when you have a woman who is settled, who has peace of mind at the workplace, it will also give productivity, they'll give their all, and also the child will be well taken care of. So in this case, we are trying to see like what is the win-win strategy that we can actually bring to book. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for that, and obviously a wonderful initiative that you guys at Kidogo are doing out there. And later on, I'm going to come back to you, and maybe you can just touch a bit on how anyone perhaps who's watching can reach out and support you. But you've raised some very valid points, and I want to rope Gathoni back into the conversation, because as we are talking about restructuring for recovery and resilience, we cannot forget that the mental health component is just equally as important. Like we said earlier, mind over matter. So Gathoni, you've had just the issues that Susan has raised in the context of now we are reopening, but it's business unusual because parents now have to leave their home, they're going to work, kids are not in school, and I'll tell you as a parent, there's a certain level of, peace I find knowing that my child is in a classroom somewhere and they have a very tight schedule, as opposed to knowing that I've left them in the house the entire day. I'm not necessarily privy to what it is they're gonna get up to for most of their day. You're gonna get highlights. So it's a different way of parenting, and we know, even despite the fact that we do have support systems like domestic workers and nannies, it also comes with its own challenges. So especially now, for anyone who is a parent and they still have to leave their home and they're leaving children behind, what advice would you give them? Because you've heard from Susan, we are seeing now scenarios, and especially in low-income areas, where children are actually bearing the negative brunt of the pressure that comes with living in a world where there's a pandemic.
Thank you, Tabima, for that. And Susan, you are doing a really, really good job. One of the things that we really underestimate is the fact that children also experience stressors and anxiety. They just have a different way of expressing that. And it's important for parents to be able to identify the behavior they are seeing in their children. Are they just overreacting, or are they actually experiencing anxiety or stresses? Get to the level of the child, age, obviously considering the age, and have an honest and real conversation with them in regards to what is happening around them. Because if you do not do that, then they begin asking themselves questions and telling themselves stories that are not necessarily true. Let's try and teach our children how to deal with emotions and manage emotions. The African setup, when you see a child crying, the reaction is to beat them more and tell them, stop crying. Then that only teaches them to learn how to suppress their emotions rather than learn how to deal with it. So when you teach children how to deal with emotions as they come, so when they experience anxiety, they are going to be able on their own to identify these things. So as you go to work and leave them at home, try and have that structure left for them, but also keep checking on them via phone calls. These children are very tech. It's obviously different in the setup, like what Susan is talking about, because there is no provision of maybe internet or the digital gadgets. But I'm just talking about being able to do what you can as a parent in the space that you are in. Let's allow the kids to learn how to make mistakes and correct those mistakes on their own. Most of the time, due to our own underlying issues as parents or whatever parents, you'll find that there's a lot of overcompensation. So if you did not receive, if you did not grow up, for example, in a financially stable family situation, then you're trying to overcompensate that. Or if you are not affirmed enough, then you try to overcompensate that with your children. When that happens, then you actually deter the child from being able to grow how they are supposed to grow. So every time you'll be rushing to attend to their needs and to attend to answer to all their questions instead of giving them an opportunity to learn how to do that for themselves. Because remember that this is the future generation. So if they don't learn problem solving skills now, if they don't learn how to identify crises and understand that even with crises, you can still be able to restructure your mind and recover from it and even get different and better opportunities, then we are not preparing them for the future.
Thank you, Gathoni.
Yes.
And just to remind you, obviously the Kenya Red Cross has a very wonderful initiative that actually encourages you to prioritize self-care. And as you've heard, if you're a parent, self-care should also extend to your children. The earlier that they start learning about the different ways that they can cope with their feelings and their emotions, you're actually helping them grow into better, well-rounded individuals. So if you or any of your loved ones are dealing with anything right now, and we just want to remind you that it's definitely okay not to be okay. And if you feel like you need to talk to an expert, please feel free to reach out to the Kenya Red Cross helpline, 1199. There's always a friendly voice at the other end of the line. And just in case you need, some additional support system, this service is available to you 24/7, Monday to Sunday. That means you can call at midnight, you can call at 1 a.m., you can call at 2 a.m. You're not alone. So back to our conversation on restructuring for recovery and resilience. So let me just go back to Tommy. And Tommy, in the context of Nigeria, as an example, what would you say, in your opinion, are some of the innovative ways you've seen perhaps industries or brands or even specific SMEs actually restructuring during this time? And what are some of those innovative ways you've actually seen, even like the consumer market is now taking up and saying, oh, wow, we have the world before COVID and the world after COVID. That actually after COVID, this is much better than before COVID.
All right, thank you, Tamima. Interesting one there. Okay, so let's talk about SMEs. First of all, I particularly like them because they are responsible for a large part of the employment generation around here. And I'll take Nigeria as a perfect example. Some of them are needed or need right now to look into other areas apart from what they're doing. So, for example, if you used to produce syringe, so during the COVID-19 lockdown, people in the pharmaceutical started looking at other things they can do. So syringe companies became PPE production companies. Okay, they stopped producing just syringe, but the entire suit. Some of them were producing the surgical mask. The mask that they use in the hospitals to ensure that people had it. Now, for that, we've been able to see some innovation there. So they are not just sitting on the horse. So I'd like to, first of all, highlight a particular company in Calabar. So in the South, this company is known to be a very popular syringe company. But what they did was to ensure that they start producing something that Nigeria needs now, which is the regular disposable face mask, which is not available. Interestingly, you know that we run an import-based economy, not an export-based economy. So even as small as that face mask is, we used to import it. But at the point where borders were closed and import and export was stopped and the airspace was stopped, there was no way to bring them in any longer. Those who are available are possibly stuck at the port. So we got in-house companies, Nigerian companies, indigenous companies to begin to look at that. Now, another one is the hand sanitizers.
I think we've seen that also in other African countries. Like, I'll use Kenya as an example. Like, our fashion industries have benefited because initially when the pandemic started, everyone was wearing the surgical masks. But now it's very trendy to actually have your, African print face mask. And you can even accessorize them. And I'm sure Gina knows a thing or two about this. Where's Gina? Gina, are you with us?
Despite the fact that we're doing this,
Tommy, you're breaking up.
My is back to normal. You see this to disappear. People are likely to go in this to a very good quality, develop a good quality, do your QA very well, ensure that people are able to accept it outside of your immediate country. Let us begin to export this. People are likely to go back to what they used to know. And that's where we are likely to have it. But that's the problem I foresee. Because hand sanitizers now are everywhere. And now, at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria, sanitizers went as high as, say, $20 for just a very small bottle of 25, 35 ml. But Nigerians started producing hand sanitizers, and it went as low as like $5. Now, you can imagine what's going to happen if we stop producing, because we used to import sanitizers from China. Now that everyone can produce sanitizers and they've been widely accepted, you see that a new channel of business has been opened for people. But the possibility that they will continue with that line of business is another concern. So opportunities have been coming. People have been exploring those opportunities. But will they continue to explore and produce to the best of the capacity such that Nigeria can change the narrative from being an import-based company to an economy to an export-based economy? Those are questions I think we should be asking now.
Thank you so much for that, Tommy. And let me just rope in Gina on this one, because we are obviously talking about shaping African conversations. And you've given us the example of Nigeria. But without a doubt, the pandemic has actually presented a golden opportunity for Africa, if you think about it, because for the first time, a lot of African countries and economies are actually being, challenged to actually find ways where now there is more sustainability and a reduction in over-reliance of some very basic goods and services from, Western countries and imports. So, Gina, what do you feel, in your opinion, if we look back probably 10 years from now? What are some of those opportunities that Africa as a continent, or even specific African countries, we have South Africa, we have Kenya, we have Nigeria. So what is that opportunistic moment that COVID has presented for the African economies in terms of just being more sustainable?
I think it's almost become a cliche to say that the crisis has become an inflection point in the way we shift and pivot our businesses. And as Africa, like I've said before, we're not only resilient, but we're able to repurpose. And I think the question then is how do we ensure that repurposing continues? The fact that we've been able to produce our own PPE, our own hand sanitizer, as Tommy said, and the fact that we can now depend on our own manufacturing sectors to produce these things. But will we go back to our defaults as soon as COVID is over and start importing everything? And I think that is the big question: is how do we ensure that these that this manufacturing sectors that have done so well in producing these things and even be enabling us to help other countries in our regions. How do we ensure that that continues, and how do we ensure that there's a purpose-driven playbook for us to continue ensuring that we more and more are able to be sustainable as countries on our own, and in that way, ensure that we're not spending all our foreign exchange that has really been affected because tourism is down. Exports are down for most countries. Like in Kenya, we're not exporting as many flowers or as much horticulture as we normally do. So how do we ensure that we're able to keep the foreign exchange, the very limited foreign exchange that we have in our country, by producing more and, of course, by creating more jobs for our people?
So let me invite Karina. I'd love to get your opinion on what we're discussing right now. Karina, are you with us?
Yes, thanks, Tamima. Absolutely agree with everything everybody said. I think as Africans, we really have this unique ability to just get things done, and to just really just make sure that we're finding solutions for ourselves. And I think now is a real opportunity to do that. And I agree with what Gina's saying around, we really are anticipating a lot of economic pressure, and going through that at the moment even. And I think we'll see that for some time to come, and the impact that that'll have on jobs. And I think if we think about small businesses, and really some of them who have had to even think about starting over, now's the opportunity to really think about what will be sustainable in the longer term. And I think looking at possibly diversifying what they were thinking of offering before, or in light of these new needs that we've identified as part of this crisis, what could small businesses offer in that regard? And I think what we're seeing as well is very much the e-commerce space, the tech space is absolutely thriving at the moment. I think we've also discussed all the online learning opportunities. So I think that there's a real opportunity for us. We have the competencies, we have the capabilities, we have the knowledge to be able to look inwardly and see what we can actually produce and run with ourselves, to be able to make sure that we really push through this recovery and resilience phase without being reliant on other markets. So I think we really have a great opportunity to do that. And I think certainly when we think about trust, and I mentioned trust earlier, and the building around trust, it's really about, as Gina mentioned, this idea of a purpose-driven opportunity. And brands and organizations, particularly in the private sector, have a lot of opportunity to fill the gaps that the government perhaps cannot fill. And I think it's important that we identify opportunities like, and I think it was mentioned earlier, around online learning for learners who don't have access to technology, who aren't able to do that. Where is the opportunity for the private sector to step in and do that? Where are there companies, bigger companies, who have fantastic logistical and supply chain infrastructures? How can we use those companies to help with delivering things to people that people need? Because that's their line of work, and perhaps there's opportunity to do that. So I think if we look across all the sectors and we look across the continent, I think there's formidable opportunities for us to really put our minds to that and really solve.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Karina. Now, obviously, you've had, as an African youth, I consider myself youth there. I love hearing that word opportunity, because it means that we are primed. You just have to make sure that you are well prepared. And earlier on, you heard about the opportunities that are available to you. Take this time, go online, sign up for webinars, listen to ideas from people literally from all over the world. This is not the time, like Gadoni said, to actually have negative thoughts. This is a time where sit down with people who are watakujenga, and people who can actually give you positive ideas, constructive feedback, people who are very industrious. So there's a lot of opportunities that presents itself. And obviously Africa, as a continent with one of the youngest populations across the world, this means that now for Africa's youth, if we actually take advantage of the opportunity that COVID has presented, the future can actually be very bright. Now, as always, I love hearing where you're watching us from. So I'm just going to take a couple of your comments here. Lennox Coril saying that you're enjoying this all the way from Bomet County. Thank you so much. Humphrey Shege from Nakuru County, well represented. Linda Rotich Favorite day of the week, joining from Nyandarua. I'm seeing the counties representing. Emily Wamutinda is saying that the positive thing that she has experienced during this pandemic is getting to spend enough time with children and bond. Very important. Take advantage, you know. Grab your positives where you can. Every dark cloud has a silver lining. Linda Rotich, great discussion. It's amazing how the pandemic, which has a lot of negative impacts, has shown us this other side of life. Great lessons learned on the side of digital literacy, priorities, self-awareness, and development. Linda, I love everything that you're saying. I think this new normal is actually teaching us to grow more on a personal level. Agreed. At the very least, even if you're not learning a new skill, take time, be self-aware, jijenge, you know. Take time to actually find out what do you like, what makes you happy, because ultimately your mental health is what will actually prepare you to achieve anything that you set your mind to. Kinyo Felix all the way from Meru, Bernard Alphonse, we have some amazing feedback today, and of course here Otile Sams all the way from Kisumu County. Now let me introduce some more guests. I have Faith and Anthony Muraya. Faith and Anthony, where are you guys at? Faith and Anthony, are you guys available? Okay, so unfortunately their internet connectivity is not great. So let me just take a couple of questions as we wait. So here someone has a question for Karina. Someone wants to find out, if you look at South Africa, what would you say are some of the hardest hit industries? So this is a question from Rachel. Like, what is happening down in South Africa?
Thanks for the question. I think certainly travel and tourism has been extremely hard hit. We are seeing that to start to open a little bit, but certainly only in terms of, if we think about our amazing national park, it's for day visitors only. So no accommodation unless business accommodation. Business travel only allowed at this point in time, and that's only just started recently. So I think the airline industry absolutely has also taken a knock. We've also seen in the manufacturing space with car manufacturers as well. And I think obviously unfortunately hospitality. So restaurants, food, those. I mean, we very much do have a culture in South Africa of eating out quite a bit. And eating out with friends and family, and that's something we haven't been able to do for quite a long time for obvious reasons. So I would say those are probably the hardest hit.
For that, Karina, we have a question here for Susan. Pat wants to know, how can she get in touch with Kidogo, and how can anyone support you, especially with the work that you're doing in the informal settlements?
Okay, thank you. So you can get in touch with us from our Facebook page. It's called Kidogo. Our website is www.kidogo.co. And maybe after this call, you can also reach directly to you to partner with us. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll definitely look into that. Thank you so much. So another question that I have here is, if I'm running my own business, how can I take advantage of, I'm seeing here, how can I take advantage of government opportunities in terms of loans and what not? So probably let me throw this to Gina, because we know for various industries, the government has actually created some sort of stimulus packages. Someone here wants to find out, how can they take advantage as a small business?
I believe the Ministry of Trade has an infrastructure on how one does that. I do think no country is going to have enough resources to have adequate stimulus programs, unfortunately, for us. So you know, the amounts, once you divvy them up between the various organizations, are actually quite small. But I do believe that the Ministry of Trade for smaller businesses does have the infrastructure and how one can apply to get some of the stimulus programs that are out there. Obviously, for the hospitality industry, we heard the other day the president announcing a 2 billion shillings stimulus program for the hospitality sector. Again, when you put that across the number of hotels that have closed, it is not going to be that much. But it's something, and something's better than nothing. So I do think the various ministries of trade and the ministries of tourism would be the first port of call for those kind of resources.
Okay, so there you've had it. And of course, as always with anything to do with government and opportunities, take some time, go online, research, find out what do you need to prepare in terms of your application, what sort of criteria are they using, make sure that you qualify. So it's really just a matter of you taking the personal initiative, because obviously it changes from one industry into the next. I have here Emily Wamutinda saying she works with Kidogo, and since the pandemic broke, we have been allowed to work from home. So Susan, that's your co-worker, I believe. We have Jeremy Data saying great discussion. It's good to think out of the box. Okay, so as we wind up, I'm going to start with Karina. I want everyone to give us, in your opinion, looking at probably, and I'm not even going to go too far, let me say like looking at the next probably 3 months, what advice would you give to anyone who's running a business or even anyone who's employed in terms of just making sure that they're actually able to weather the storm? So let me start with you, Karina.
Okay, sure. I think obviously every business is different. So I think if we're looking at the small business space, very much think about if you're struggling as a result of the economic downturn, as a result of COVID, rethink your business, rethink your approach and your strategy. Are you providing something at this point that people really need and is going to help solve any of our societal problems? Really, as we mentioned already, lean on stimulus packages that are available within your market to be able to do that and to maybe recapitalize your business, to think about it differently. I think in the larger organization space, it's really about thinking about all of your stakeholder groups, and the number one priority has to be your employee base, making sure that they're cared for, that they've been considered, and that the gradual return to office and return to work process is happening in a very careful and considerate and humane way. And also thinking about your broader supply chain and your customers in that, and making sure that you're finding solutions for them as well.
And maybe let me go to Gathoni. So Gathoni, in the context of resilience, so what is that one piece of advice you'd ask everyone to actually keep to, looking at the immediate future? You have to unmute. Gathoni, you're muted. Okay, now we have you back.
Right. Start by accepting where you are and look for new ways in how to do things. Practice self-care. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot be able to grow if deep down inside you, you're completely starving. And in terms of recovery, just look at it in two ways. The short term, which is what we are doing now, where it's the immediate action and response. That's why we are seeing people coming up with new business ideas and stuff like that. But in the long run, look at what can I be able to learn from this experience, and taking those lessons into consideration and planning outright will actually make your business more sustainable. And also flexibility. Be flexible. Let's not be so rigid. So if you find a way to pivot yourself with the current situation, like what Karina has said, offer what is needed now, and how can I be able to pivot myself in that situation? Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Take care of your mind.
Absolutely.
Take care of your mind, absolutely.
Everything starts up here, mind over matter. Your mindset is very important. Some of the people who've achieved the greatest feats in human history, it all started from up here. You have to build your mental strength. Well, our time is almost up, and as always, thank you so much for staying with us. I love that you guys today were very interactive, lots of feedback coming in terms of questions and topics. So if you have any topic ideas, if you feel like there's something that you want us to address, please feel free to suggest as well. And if you feel like you can also add value to some of these conversations we're having and you want to be a guest, just quickly go slide into the Switch TV DM. Let us know your area of expertise and of course what it is you can offer. Well, that's all the time we have right now. I want to thank all my guests, from Gina, Tommy, Gathoni, Karina, Tabitha, Susan. Thank you so much everyone for making the time As always, we are doing this for you. Remember, the one thing I've had in today's conversation, opportunity. The time is now. Wherever it is you're watching from, whether you're catching us from Nigeria, South Africa, whichever part of Africa, or even right here in Kenya, Nairobi, the time is now. And especially for you as a young person, this is not the time to get depressed. This is not the time to feel like the world is on top of you. Deal with those feelings. Talk to someone. I mentioned earlier the Kenya Red Cross has the 1199 helpline. Reach out. There's always an expert who can actually walk you through any negative feelings. But over and above that, invest in yourself, just to make sure that you're able to secure your future and ultimately improve your quality of life. Well, that's it from me, Tamima. Thank you so much for joining us here on Shaping African Conversations. We'll be back next week, same time, same place.